Bella's journey began with a simple thrill of an impromptu road trip. She had just graduated college and was eager to taste the freedom of the open road. The sun was setting, casting a golden hue over the highway, and Bella felt a sense of adventure that made her heart race with excitement. As the evening turned into night, Bella realized she needed to refuel. She was in the middle of nowhere, the stretch of road flanked by dense forests on either side. Relief washed over her when she spotted the dim, flickering lights of a gas station in the distance. She pulled in, the gravel crunching under her tires as she parked beside a lone pump. The gas station was eerily quiet, the kind of quiet that made the hairs on the back of Bella's neck stand up. The store's fluorescent lights buzzed and flickered, casting an unsettling glow on the cracked pavement. Bella stepped out of her car, the night air chilling her to the bone despite it being a warm summer night. She glanced around, noting the lack of other vehicles or people. Just as she began to pump gas, a figure emerged from the shadows of the station's office. It was an older man, perhaps in his 60s, with a weathered face that seemed to have seen too many harsh days. His eyes were cold and distant, but he forced a smile that didn't reach them. "Evening, miss. Need any help?" he asked, his voice gravelly. Bella shook her head, feeling an inexplicable urge to finish and leave as quickly as possible. "No, thank you. I'm just getting some gas." The man nodded but lingered, watching her with an intensity that made Bella's skin crawl. She hurried through the process, and when she went inside to pay, the atmosphere grew even more oppressive. The store was a cluttered mess of old, dusty products, the air thick with the scent of mildew and something else she couldn't quite place. As Bella approached the counter, she noticed a younger man standing behind it. He had the same distant eyes as the older man but seemed slightly more approachable. "That'll be $20, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Bella handed over the money, her eyes darting around the store, trying to ignore the feeling of being watched. Just as she was about to leave, the younger man leaned forward and spoke in a low, urgent tone. "You should get back on the road quickly. It's not safe here after dark." Bella's heart pounded in her chest. "Why? What's going on?" The man glanced towards the older man, who was now standing by the door, his eyes fixed on them. "Just trust me. Leave. Now." Bella didn't need to be told twice. She rushed out of the store, feeling the men's eyes on her back as she got into her car. She started the engine and drove off, the gas station quickly disappearing in her rearview mirror. But the sense of unease stayed with her, growing stronger with each passing mile. As she continued down the dark highway, Bella's car suddenly began to sputter. The engine roared and then died, leaving her stranded in the middle of nowhere. She tried to restart the car, but it was no use. Panic set in as she realized her phone had no signal. She was alone, in the dark, with no way to call for help. Bella sat in her car for a moment, trying to calm her racing heart. She decided to get out and see if she could figure out what was wrong with the engine. As she opened the hood, the sound of footsteps crunching on gravel made her freeze. She looked up to see a pair of headlights approaching in the distance. Relief flooded through her. Perhaps it was someone who could help. The vehicle, an old pickup truck, pulled up behind her car. The driver stepped out, and Bella's blood ran cold. It was the older man from the gas station. "Having car trouble?" he asked, his tone devoid of the previous friendliness. Bella forced a smile. "Yeah, it just died on me. Do you think you could help?" The man walked over to her, peering under the hood. "Looks like your engine overheated. You should have let it cool down before driving off so fast." Bella's heart sank. She knew she hadn't driven far enough for the engine to overheat. Something was very wrong. I didn't realize. Do you think you can fix it?" He looked at her, his eyes gleaming with something sinister. "Why don't you come with me? There's a phone at the station. You can call for a tow." Bella hesitated. Every instinct screamed at her not to go with him, but she had no other option. "Okay, let me just grab my bag." She reached into her car, fumbling for her bag while trying to think of a way out. Her fingers brushed against her phone, and she quickly turned it on, hoping to get a signal. Nothing. She grabbed her bag and turned back to the man, who was now standing uncomfortably close. "Ready?" he asked, his smile sending chills down her spine. Bella nodded, following him to the truck. As she climbed in, she noticed the back seat was filled with various tools and what looked like blood-stained rags. Her pulse quickened as the man started the truck, and they drove back towards the gas station. The drive was silent, the man's eyes occasionally flicking towards Bella. She tried to stay calm, thinking of ways to escape. When they reached the gas station, Bella's heart sank further. The younger man was waiting outside, his expression unreadable. The older man got out and opened the door for Bella. "Go inside and use the phone," he instructed. Bella walked towards the store, the younger man following closely behind. She glanced at him, hoping for some sign of help, but his face remained impassive. Inside, the store seemed even darker and more oppressive than before. "Where's the phone?" Bella asked, her voice trembling. The younger man pointed to a corner of the store. "Over there." Bella moved towards the phone, but before she could reach it, she felt a sharp pain in the back of her head. The world spun, and she collapsed to the floor, darkness enveloping her. When Bella awoke, she was in a dimly lit room, her hands and feet bound. Panic surged through her as she struggled against the ropes. The room was small, with concrete walls and a single, flickering light bulb hanging from the ceiling. She could hear muffled voices outside the door. Tears streamed down Bella's face as she realized the gravity of her situation. She was trapped, with no one knowing where she was. The door creaked open, and the older man stepped inside, his eyes gleaming with malice. "Welcome back," he said, his voice dripping with mockery. "We're going to have some fun." Bella's heart raced as he approached, a sinister grin spreading across his face. She tried to back away, but the ropes held her in place. "Please, let me go," she begged, her voice breaking. The man laughed, a sound that sent chills down her spine. "Oh, we can't do that. You see, we have a tradition here. Every so often, we get visitors like you, and we make sure they stay for a while." Bella's mind raced, trying to think of a way out. "Someone will come looking for me," she said desperately. "They'll know something's wrong." The man shook his head, his grin widening. "Out here, no one will find you. This place, it's forgotten, just like you will be." With that, he turned and left the room, leaving Bella in the suffocating darkness. She sobbed, feeling utterly helpless. Hours passed, or perhaps it was days' time had lost all meaning. She was given little food and water, just enough to keep her alive. One night, Bella heard the sound of keys jangling and the door creaking open again. But this time, it was the younger man. He looked at her with something resembling pity. "Why are you doing this?" Bella asked, her voice hoarse from crying. He sighed, glancing over his shoulder before speaking. "I don't have a choice. My father, he's a monster. If I don't help him, he'll kill me too." Bella's eyes widened. "You can still help me. We can both get out of here." The man shook his head. "It's not that simple, but I'll try to leave the door unlocked tonight. If you can get out and find a way to the road, maybe you can get help." Bella nodded, hope flickering in her chest for the first time. "Thank you." True to his word, that night the door was left unlocked. Bella waited until the gas station was silent before making her move. She crept out of the room, her heart pounding with fear and anticipation. The store was dark, the only light coming from the flickering neon sign outside. Bella moved cautiously, avoiding creaky floorboards and holding her breath. She reached the front door and slipped outside, the cool night air hitting her face like a blessing. She glanced around, her eyes adjusting to the darkness. She could see the outline of the forest and the faint glow of the highway in the distance. She ran, her legs weak but fueled by adrenaline. Branches scratched her arms and face as she pushed through the dense underbrush, the fear of being caught driving her forward. She stumbled onto the highway, her breath coming in ragged gasps. In the distance, she saw headlights approaching. She waved her arms frantically, praying the driver would stop. The car slowed down, and a middle-aged woman rolled down the window. "Are you okay?" the woman asked, her voice filled with concern. Bella nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Please, help me. They're after me." The woman quickly unlocked the door, and Bella climbed in, her body trembling. Bella's heart pounded in her chest as the woman's car sped down the highway, but just as she began to feel a sense of safety, she noticed headlights rapidly approaching from behind. The old pickup truck barreled down the road, the engine roaring like an enraged beast. Bella's pulse quickened as the old man's silhouette became clearer in the driver's seat. "Please, drive faster," Bella pleaded, her voice trembling with fear. The woman pressed down on the gas, but the truck closed the distance alarmingly fast. Before Bella could react, the truck rammed into the back of the car, sending it skidding off the road and into a ditch. Bella's head slammed against the window, stars exploding in her vision. "Run!" the woman shouted, fumbling with her seatbelt. Bella's instincts kicked in. She pushed the door open and tumbled out, her legs shaky but driven by sheer terror. She scrambled up the embankment and darted into the dense forest, the sound of the old man's laughter echoing behind her. "Run, little rabbit. You can't hide from me," he taunted, his voice cutting through the darkness like a knife. Bella's breath came in ragged gasps as she plunged deeper into the forest. Branches clawed at her skin, and the underbrush tugged at her clothes, but she pushed on, driven by the primal need to survive. She could hear the old man crashing through the woods behind her, his footsteps heavy and relentless. "You think you can escape me? I've been hunting for years. No one gets away," he bellowed, his voice closer than before. Bella's mind raced as she desperately searched for a place to hide. She spotted a fallen tree and crawled underneath it, trying to quiet her breathing. Her heart thundered in her ears as the old man's footsteps grew louder. He was so close now. She could hear him muttering to himself. Come out, wherever you are. You can't hide forever, little rabbit." Bella bit her lip to stifle a sob, tears streaming down her face. She clung to the hope that he would pass by, but her hopes were dashed when his boots appeared inches from her face. She held her breath, praying he wouldn't look down. The old man paused, his breath heavy and uneven. "I can smell your fear," he whispered, his voice dripping with sadistic glee. "It's delicious." Bella's pulse quickened, her body trembling with fear. The old man's boots lingered for a moment longer before he moved on, his footsteps fading into the distance. Bella waited, counting to 100 in her head before daring to move. When she finally crawled out from under the tree, she felt a glimmer of hope. But her relief was short-lived. As she crept through the forest, she heard the old man's voice again, this time singing a twisted lullaby. "Hush, little baby, don't say a word. Papa's gonna find you in the dark, unheard." Bella's panic surged anew. She ran blindly, her vision blurred by tears. She stumbled over roots and rocks, her body battered and bruised, but she kept moving, driven by the knowledge that to stop was to die. She burst into a small clearing, her breath hitching as she saw a dilapidated cabin. Desperation overrode caution as she sprinted towards it, praying it offered some semblance of safety. She threw open the door and slammed it behind her, her eyes scanning the dark interior. The cabin was empty, save for a few broken pieces of furniture and a rotting mattress. Bella rushed to the nearest window, peering out into the darkness. The old man was nowhere in sight, but she knew he wasn't far behind. She needed to find a place to hide. She spotted a trapdoor in the corner of the room and hurried over, pulling it open to reveal a dank cellar. Without hesitation, she climbed down, closing the door above her just as she heard the old man's footsteps outside the cabin. "Come on out, little rabbit. I know you're in there," he called, his voice sickeningly sweet. "You can't hide from me." Bella crouched in the darkness, her breath coming in shallow, silent gasps. She heard the cabin door creak open and the old man's footsteps as he entered. He moved slowly, deliberately, savoring the hunt. "I can hear your heartbeat, it's like a drum, calling me to you." Bella pressed a hand over her mouth, stifling a sob. She could hear him moving around the cabin, his footsteps methodical and unhurried. He was toying with her, relishing her fear. Suddenly, the trapdoor was yanked open, and the old man's face appeared, illuminated by a sliver of moonlight. His eyes gleamed with triumph. "There you are," he said, reaching down to grab her. Bella screamed and kicked, her foot connecting with his face. He grunted in pain, momentarily losing his grip. Seizing the opportunity, Bella scrambled out of the cellar and bolted for the door. She didn't look back, her only thought to get as far away as possible. She burst out of the cabin and into the forest, the old man's enraged shouts echoing behind her. She ran until her lungs burned and her legs threatened to give out. She stumbled upon a river, its swift current glistening in the moonlight. With no other option, Bella waded into the icy water, gasping as the cold bit into her skin. She let the current carry her downstream, hoping it would mask her scent and sound. She floated for what felt like an eternity, her body numb and exhausted. Finally, the river deposited her on a rocky shore. Bella crawled out, shivering uncontrollably. She forced herself to her feet, knowing she couldn't stop yet. She staggered into the woods, each step a monumental effort. As dawn began to break, Bella spotted a road in the distance. Summoning the last of her strength, she stumbled towards it, praying for a passing car. She collapsed onto the asphalt, her vision blurring. A car screeched to a halt beside her, and she felt hands lifting her, heard voices filled with concern. Bella's consciousness slipped away. The last thing she heard was the distant howl of the old man's rage. When Bella awoke, she was in a hospital bed, the sterile smell of antiseptic filling her nose. A nurse smiled down at her. "You're safe now," she said gently. "The police are on their way." Bella nodded weakly, relief flooding through her. She had survived, but she knew the nightmares would follow her, the old man's twisted voice forever echoing in her mind. If you enjoyed this spine-chilling story, don't forget to hit the subscribe button. Until next time, stay safe and remember, sometimes the most ordinary places can hide the darkest secrets.